Welcome, dear viewers and listeners of the Cybernews podcast, a weekly show about all things tech. This week, we're hosting a very special guest on his newsletter called Disconnect and the award-winning podcast Tech Won't Save Us. He mercilessly disses Elon Musk, shatters the rosy bubbles rising from Silicon Valley. He's Paris Marx, a Canadian journalist, author, and tech critic. Welcome, Paris. Very nice to have you here on our show.
Thanks so much. It's great to join you.
So I guess I'd like to start with a very basic and probably even a stupid question. What's wrong with tech, Paris, and why won't it save us all? Why is this all somehow not really a brave new world that the tech companies are trying to paint, but a rather grim and depressing old one, really?
Yeah, how long do we have? We could go on for a really long time with that one.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot wrong in the tech industry, right? I think fundamentally, just at the kind of core foundational level, they're really being driven to, increase their share price and get profits. And that drives technological development in a particular way. And we have, increasingly seen the consequences of that over the past number of years, whether it is the labor model of the gig economy or the rollout of algorithmic surveillance in workplaces like Amazon, or, all of the data collection that's required for the business models of Facebook and Google and so many of these other online companies. And increasingly now with this kind of AI push that we've been seeing, how a lot of these companies are even degrading their previously successful products to try to squeeze a bit more revenue out of it, whether that is, what Google has been doing with its search engine or what Facebook has been doing with its social media platform for quite a while now. We see that, even the things that we were once told were, positive benefits that came out of having the internet are increasingly having to be eroded to serve, the shareholders, right? So I think there are many other things that we could talk about, of course, but I think fundamentally that is like a core problem that we see within the tech industry, and is part of the reason that I think we can be quite sure that these tech companies, as they're currently set up, are not going to be delivering these great kind of social benefits to all of us, because that's not their goal at the end of the day. It's to drive profits for shareholders.
Yeah. I've read your piece on the newsletter from March, I believe. The digital revolution has failed. While I certainly agree with basically everything you so neatly summarize in the piece, like, the initial anarchic years of the internet quickly giving way to the very few corporations that are owning stuff, including most of our data right now, and Google and Facebook selling out and looking really horrible right now. The destructiveness of the gig economy and this current ocean of AI-generated trash really on the web as well. Who do you think, though, is let's call him a Robespierre, so to speak? Who is at fault individually or collectively of this? Because, it might be the rich, it might be the greed, it might be both, because they're kind of synonyms, right? The Reagan-esque deregulation frenzy that was kind of visible from the 1980s. I've been reading this book, The Evil Geniuses by Kurt Jacobson, I think, and he wrote it in 2020. I think Trump was still president, but he's writing basically about how, except the gadgets maybe and the wider TV screens and all that, the U.S. isn't really changing at all since the 1980s. I mean, he talks about clothes as well. But basically the idea, the economy, I don't know, who do we thank for? Like Milton Friedman, Hayek, the Chicago School, who do we thank for the current setup of the U.S. economy, including the tech industry? Or is it something entirely else, do you think?
Yeah, I think that there are many things that you can point to there, right? I think starting with the neoliberal era and the deregulation of that period is key to shaping how we arrive in this moment, and the increasing pressure or incentive that is put on increasing the share price over virtually everything else. And that was just accelerated during the Clinton years when he made further changes to the tax rules so that you would be incentivized to increase share prices and to have executive compensation through shares. That, of course, makes the focus always on increasing the share price at the expense of pretty much everything else. But, that's just one small piece of this, right? I think ultimately the way that I see it is it's not not so much about individuals. Obviously, when we talk about technology, when we talk about the tech industry, we often talk through the lens of individuals because that is a way to tell a story about what is going on, to make it relatable to people. When we talk about Elon Musk, or we talk about Sam Altman, or we talk about Peter Thiel, or whoever else who has been involved in this space over the past number of decades, that kind of illustrate how the tech industry and how American capitalism has been evolving for the past number of decades. But I think ultimately, for me, when I see this, it's really a story of broader kind of forces that are guiding the development of these particular problems. It's broader forces of capital that are kind of incentivizing politicians to do these deregulatory efforts, that are incentivizing CEOs and corporate executives to take particular actions to increase profits, increase revenues, increase what they return to shareholders, because those are the kind of basic incentives that are built into the system, to basically have these decisions be made. So I think we can talk about the individuals, but I think it's important to recognize, at least what I feel, is that even if certain individuals were not placed as they were, we would have seen somewhat of a similar development take hold, because ultimately that is what was working for, the kind of key forces driving the system, and would have gotten us into a relatively similar place. Maybe there would have been some differences. Maybe our big social media platform wouldn't have been Facebook and would have been something else, but would have still been sucking all of this data out of us, because that is the way that things were kind of set up to succeed. But yeah, that's sort of how I see things. I don't think it's not valuable to talk about individuals, because they do certainly play a role, but I don't think we could ignore these broader structural forces that are pushing everything along.
Yeah. Well, just last week, I think there was a campaign started by this lobby group in DC, or in America in general. I think it's called Progress for something. I can't remember now, but it's
Chamber of Progress.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. It's a tech lobby, basically. I wrote about it, and there was a sentence in the press release there that kind of caught my attention. They wrote something about, like, we're now trying to lowering barriers to arts, and I thought, well, maybe you work or put some effort into something, and then voila, there's your art. And human effort is just so cynically being undervalued by these companies. I think I don't know, segments of the economy to them. That's just a thought. I don't know. We want to talk about AI, right, Paulina?
Yes.
Welcome.
The thing is that with the AI, that most of the companies, they are just like giving us the proposition that, okay, with these models, we are going to work less, and we get the automation and we will profit more. But like there is a dark side to that, because just like the Industrial Revolution, it took away like the physical jobs from the factories. It seems like, okay, the AI is bringing the next wave of this revolution, and it touches the white collar jobs. Like, for example, all of the graphic designers, copywriters, journalists, mid managers, they all got like scared, because the AI models, they kind of threaten their jobs. So even like for the developers who are writing code, it also like it was a bit of the unknown. And it seems like it's like a snake eating its own tail, because like the tech industry, it creates the technology that will take their own jobs. So like what went wrong with this human idea to work less, that now it's threatening the very existence of our jobs and what we do. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? When the AI was targeted at the warehouse workers and the food delivery workers and the ride hail drivers, it was like, oh, that's probably not great, but hey, it doesn't affect us, the developers who are making these products. And it's actually quite convenient for us because now we can pull out our app and access these things really easily. And the prices are quite cheap. So let's not think too much about it. I think that there has been growing awareness about that angle of, this AI and what it's been doing for quite some time because, we had a whole cycle of this in the mid 2010s, right? When the whole idea was that AI and robots were going to take all of our jobs and maybe we were going to need a basic income so that people weren't going to be destitute because there were going to be so few jobs left. And then none of that happened. But these companies did roll out AI in the gig economy in various workplaces in order to reduce the power that workers had over their labor and to make it harder for them to unionize. And so now we basically just see a new wave of this targeted at some different industries with this generative AI push that has been happening for about the past year and a half. So we see a lot of creative workers, potentially programmers, writers, people like that, really bearing the brunt of this wave of the AI kind of boom and AI hype. Last year, Sam Altman and a lot of these figures were talking about how AI was really going to change the world and it was this big revolution and it was going to have all these positive benefits and it might actually threaten all of our lives because, the AIs might become sentient and then decide that they hate us and want to kill us all, right? This year, I think that the narrative has really changed on that. I think that, they're basically showing off these various different features, whether it's Google or OpenAI or Apple just yesterday, where certainly there is some potential benefit that comes with these features. It's making some things that we do more efficient, but it's clearly not changing the world like they were making us believe last year. And you can very clearly see how some of these AI tools are already being rolled out to make it difficult for certain, say, concept artists or writers or illustrators or people like that to get the work that they were doing before, because now these companies are saying, oh, we can use the image generators or we can use ChatGPT for some of these things. And it's not that we don't need the human worker at all, but we don't need you as much. So we're not going to give you as much work as we were going to give you in the past, or it's a justification to lay off a bunch of journalists, as we've been seeing at a lot of publications in the United States, and I'm sure in other countries as well. So again, the threat is not so much the AI itself, right, and what it's going to do, because ultimately what it does is shaped by, on the one hand, what it can technically do, but also what us as humans want it to do. And we're in a place where the people who are deciding what it does and who it impacts are the CEOs and the executives at these major companies, and they're just looking to cut costs and labor costs in particular if they can manage to do it, and of course also enforce kind of greater power over that labor. So it's no surprise to see that is the way that they're doing it. And the one other thing that I would add there is that we often talk about these AI tools as if, it's just the computer doing all this stuff and there's no human behind the scene as well. But we know very clearly that there is a lot of human labor that goes into creating this AI stuff, whether it's taking all of this work, all of this art, all of this writing that we have collectively done off of the internet to train their models, but then also, the very poorly paid workers who they either hire through subcontractors in places like Kenya and pay very poorly in order to try to moderate and sift through all of this data. But then the other piece of it as well is that a lot of these, supposedly AI systems actually require a lot of kind of what's usually called click work, these very poorly paid workers on platforms like Mechanical Turk or Clickworker that take tasks where they can be paid pennies to do these little data annotation tasks and things like that, so that the AI systems actually know what they're looking at when they ingest all of this data. So yeah, these are all pieces to understand, and at every level it shows kind of the degradation of labor, of pay, of workers' rights, and how these companies just look at these technologies as ways to further increase their power.
Yeah, it's a very good point that, the behind the AI is people who make decisions. So it's not the AI by itself is a bad actor. It's there is the entire system and the entire...
Yeah. It's funny though.
Totally. I saw a meme going around that just said AI is people, and I was like, yeah, of course it is.
Definitely.
Yeah, because to me it seems like, okay, so let's say I'm a guy somewhere in Pennsylvania in the 80s or 90s, And and the robots are coming like slowly, but they're coming to my, let's say, factory. I'm working as I don't know, I'm stocking boxes in a warehouse somewhere, right? So okay, so no human workers. We need less of them. And one day I'm still working, and I say no, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna do my own thing, and my own thing would be, let's say, painting or whatnot. 20 years later, or 15 or 10 years later, the AI generator is going to do my work that I really wanted to do. So it's like a kind of cycle and circle, and they're taking everything from us. It seems. I don't know. You mentioned Apple.
Totally.
Yeah,
we were told that the robots were like going to do all the mundane work and like be our servants and all this kind of stuff. And instead they're taking over the creative work, and we're stuck with like all the mundane stuff that they can't actually do. And like, it's the most dystopian possible future.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Apple as well, and its event yesterday. Its new AI features that will be supposedly integrated throughout its operating systems. I enjoy the slogan a lot, AI for the rest of us. So I immediately thought, like, for whom? For the plebs or something? I don't know. What does it mean? Because as far as I'm aware, the Vision Pro, okay, it's not AI or whatever, but it's still an Apple gadget. It's $3,500, right? So it's not it's not for the rest of us. I would say, I don't know. Is Apple, though, do you think it's different from any other big tech companies because they're marketing themselves to be in terms of like data security and privacy protection and whatnot, and maybe being a bit more careful in AI integration than other companies?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because Apple is still very much more of a hardware company than like a services company, right? Or a social media company or an advertising company or anything like that. Certainly they do have a growing services business where they sell things like News Plus and TV Plus and Apple Music and these sorts of subscription services. And that has been a growing piece of their revenue pie over the past number of years, especially as hardware sales have been kind of stagnating, iPhone sales in particular, which is the real lion's share of Apple's revenue. Basically, I think what you see with what they showed off with the AI features is that on the one hand, the AI, the generative AI boom and moment is not this transformational moment that these companies were trying to sell us last year when they were saying that, it was going to change the world and all this kind of stuff. And that it was like this new, this new era of computation. That is not true. And I think we can see that in the OpenAI and OpenAI and Google presentations that happened last month, where they were just showing off a bunch of mundane features that they were adding to their kind of product libraries. And we can see that very clearly with what Apple has showed off, right? It has clearly picked out some generative AI features that it thinks will be appealing to its user base, to add more functionality to its products. It's not selling this as some kind of service that you need to subscribe to, like, what ChatGPT has done. And I think what Google is doing as well, where there's like a premium version of its Gemini chatbot and kind of services that you can subscribe to. Apple Intelligence is very clearly, Apple Intelligence is, of course, just the name that it has stuck on its generative AI features to give it its own kind of Apple-y branding. But they're just new features that are being added to its hardware products, right? And the real goal here is not to say, okay, this is going to change the world. This is, wholly different from anything you've seen before. It's like, okay, here are some new attractive features that will be available on your products, but you're probably only going to be able to get them if you buy a new product in the fall. So, maybe go buy some new hardware, right? Because that is like the core of Apple's business. So, of course, that's what they want to do. I don't think that necessarily means that like Apple is a more ethical tech company or anything like that. It's just that the way that it makes its money is different. And so that, creates some different incentives for it. Of course, it has tried to emphasize the fact that it cares about people's privacy. A lot of kind of tech, what would you say, activist groups or, lobby groups or whatnot, who are not like in the pockets of the tech industry, have been skeptical of those claims for quite a while. Of course, yes, they're better than, Google or Facebook or whatever, but they're still probably not as good as what they try to make us believe. And, I'm sure that there will probably be some issues that come out with these artificial intelligence features that it's adding in the next few months, because the reality is that we can't actually use them yet. And part of what happened with Google last month is they rolled out AI overviews, and we could all use it, or at least all the Americans could use it in the in the search engine, and saw that the product sucked, and that it was saying the most ridiculous things to people when it was supposed to be the search engine that people rely on, that gives you reliable information. And so when Apple rolls out these features in the fall, or when people start to get access to the betas in the coming months, it's possible that people are going to find that Siri is saying some really crazy stuff, and that there are some other really weird things happening with these generative AI features. But for the moment, all we see is what Apple showed off, on stage at the Worldwide Developers Conference. So it looks pretty cool and attractive, and like Apple is finally moving in the direction of having these things. But I don't think it's some big change. I think that if we weren't in this moment where there was this hype around generative AI, these features would not have been treated as though they were any kind of anything notably different from what they're doing before, because there's already a ton of AI features within Apple products that are just not generative AI and using these large language models and stuff, right? And this moment just works for Apple to say, hey, there is this set of features that we have branded as Apple Intelligence, and now to get access to these, you need to buy some new hardware. And so since people are still kind of excited about generative AI, I think it will help them sell some new iPhones in the fall.
Yeah. What if Siri screws up, Elon Musk calls out and then say, hey, let's insert a Neuralink inside Siri, and then it all explodes like it should.
Yeah. Elon's very mad. Not for any justifiable reason.
Yeah.
It's just that he really hates OpenAI. And he has started his own AI company, XAI, which has the Grok chatbot that people can use in Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days.
Yeah.
And he's just always mad when OpenAI gets any kind of business success. And so to see them signing a deal with Apple, he went on a bit of a tirade on Twitter yesterday, completely making things the reasons that he was saying he was so angry about don't even seem to be actually how Apple has integrated this ChatGPT functionality into the iPhone. But it didn't matter because Elon was mad, and because Elon was mad, a bunch of news organizations had to write articles about the fact that Elon was mad.
Yeah.
Because that drives clicks and stuff. Right?
Yeah, true. But Elon might be mad at OpenAI for Elon reasons, right? But it doesn't mean that OpenAI is this angelic company. This free bird that is trying to save the world or help the world with its new products or whatnot, because the cult of Sam Altman is something deeply irritating me since late 2022, 23, sorry, or 2, yeah. So it's just I don't know. Now that even more details are coming out about Altman's behavior in the past or in the company, these employees are speaking out, especially the ones that are actually know what they're talking about when they're speaking about artificial general intelligence and whatnot. I don't know. Makes you wonder, right? Whether the old board maybe was right in attempting to fire him. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I think so. I think it would have been better if they got him out of there. Even though the people who were behind it, I don't think I agree with either, because they were, kind of the pro AGI people who are just concerned that, we're not being safe enough when we're developing AGI. I think AGI, artificial general intelligence, is a big fantasy of tech people who read a bit too much science fiction, basically. But yeah, you won't hear me defending OpenAI or ChatGPT. These are not tools that I like. It's not a company that I like. I'm no fan of Sam Altman at all. But yeah, Elon Musk is just a big joke and remains one. Also a scary fascist, so that too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Paulina, do you want to, talk about the cost of AI as well?
Yeah,
it's huge.
that's the topic that I wanted to ask you about. It's the cost of the AI and in general the tech industry, because the Silicon Valley and now the AI models, they are running on the tremendous amount of energy, and I think you wrote about it in your blog. And ChatGPT by itself uses 17,000 times more than one household in the US. So all this energy needs to be produced, and the climate change is not gone, even though maybe we forgot about it, but it's here. And there is also like a moral price that the tech industry bears, because in the developing countries, like mostly in Africa, like to make the gadgets, you need to use the resources which are mainly extracted in Africa. And it's like, for example, in Congo, it's been the country for decades have been torn by the war and the displacement and the child labor, and there is like a shadow that falls on the tech companies that they are buying
Minerals,
the
right?
minerals,
Yeah.
which are like affected by these conflicts. And well, we are encouraged to buy the new gadgets, like as you mentioned, like every season or even twice a season, we are encouraged to buy a new gadgets that, okay, to produce them, you need to exploit the other countries. And, like at the end, these gadgets probably will end up again in Africa in like a huge electronics wastelands, like in Ghana, where most of the garbage is imported from the global north. So like we as the users, we are normally like we are held responsible. Like, okay, you need to be conscious. You need to buy make a conscious decisions when you buy. But it feels like that the tech companies, they get like a guilt-free pass on this, because they
don't care. Let's just say it.
yeah, they just don't care, and like yeah, they don't care about the supply chains. So do you think we have reached the point where we should hold the companies responsible for their supply chains and all this ecological impact that the tech industry
Is it
makes?
even possible to do that, though? I don't know. Paris, what do you think?
It would be difficult. I think we have to like hope that it would be possible, because if not, it feels pretty gloomy.
Pretty
I know that
depressing.
there was, yeah, exactly. If you in the United States a few years ago, that they forced the tech companies to start reporting on their supply chains, to at least say like where they were getting their minerals, where the minerals were being smelted, so that you could see the types of companies that they were dealing with. And of course, people found that there were clearly child labor in some of those supply chains as a result of that, in the Congo certainly, but also in other parts of the world where some of these other minerals have been extracted. I think there's been a bit less focus on that in the past few years, actually, like on the supply chains and what's been happening there, which is unfortunate, because all these things are still going on. I think when we think about the devices and buying devices, obviously we very much know that these companies develop products that are meant to kind of give out after a certain number of years, so that you have to buy a new one, right? This kind of planned obsolescence that goes into it, because a company like Apple wants you to be buying new products on a regular basis, because that's how they make their money. And if you're not going to buy a new iPhone every few years, then that really affects their bottom line. The more often that they can get you to upgrade, the better it is for them, because they're incentivized to grow their sales, grow their profits, grow their revenues. That's why we saw the addition of the iPhone X and then the iPhone Pro models a few years ago, because they were seeing sales, unit sales slow down, and so they needed to increase the price of the products, so that they could have their revenue numbers continue to grow even as actual unit sale numbers slowed down. But even when we look at the generative AI moment, as you say, there's so much energy and so many resources that go into powering these tools. There's so much more energy and computationally intensive than the types of things that the types of use cases that they're replacing, basically, the chatbots replacing just search requests and things like that. And so we see at the moment this massive build out of data centers that has been happening for a few years and is continuing to accelerate right now around the world. These kind of massive warehouses that are just stuffed full of tens of thousands of servers, often owned by companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, but there are some other providers as well that are building them too. And this is really to power their AI ambitions, because they recognize that these tools will be so much more computationally intensive, and they want to continue rolling them out in many more ways. Back in January at the World Economic Forum, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, was asked about the climate impact of these technologies by Bloomberg, and he said that we're going to need much more energy than we thought we needed in the past. And in order to create that energy, he thinks we're going to need an energy breakthrough in nuclear technologies, but he doesn't believe that's actually going to arrive in time, or acknowledges that it's unlikely to arrive in time because, we're facing the climate crisis. We need to reduce our emissions. And so his response to that was not to say, okay, maybe I, Sam Altman, should reassess my vision of these AI tools and their rollout and whether we should all be using them in the way that I want people to use them, but just to say that, okay, we should geoengineer the planet, which is a very risky endeavor, so that we can keep increasing emissions and hopefully try to control the amount of global heating that is essentially happening. And the final thing I would say about that is just that, again, what is driving this adoption of these tools, the rollout of these tools, because we know that they're not only energy intensive and computationally intensive, but they're also very expensive to run because of that. And it's not clear how these companies are actually making money by selling these tools, but it is beneficial for companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, because it drives more business into their cloud businesses, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. And this is part of what they're trying to do with these tools. Microsoft has this very clear and powerful agreement with OpenAI. It basically owns 49% of that company. And a lot of the money that it has given OpenAI is actually in credits for Microsoft Azure, for its cloud platforms, so that it can run its tools on those servers. And it basically creates the incentive then for when companies adopt these tools, they end up going to Microsoft Azure to host them there, to run them there, to do various things there to increase their cloud subscriptions. So this is how the major tech companies are looking to make their money off of AI. It's not through much through selling subscriptions to these services, but by making sure that there's greater demand on the cloud platforms and making their money that way. And as you're saying, there's a lot of problems that come with that: the energy use, the resource use, all of the minerals that need to be extracted to build the servers that go into those centers that get frequently cycled out. And they're not well recycled. As you say, they end up in these kind of e-waste trash piles in various parts of the world. And we're going to have to deal with this if we really want to think about how these processes can be done in any kind of a sustainable way, if that's possible at all.
It's also costly for companies, though, as well. I mean, you mentioned yourself in the newsletter, the article that I read as well in the Wall Street Journal about the premise that I guess that the AI revolution is nowhere to be seen, really, and it's already fading away. To be fair, it's like it's very expensive to make these models and make them run as well smoothly over the time. And you buy chips from NVIDIA for billions of dollars, but then you make a lot less in revenue. And you might be valuated as OpenAI is in what, 80 billion or $90 billion, but then if your revenue is $2 billion, that's nothing to show, really. And those investors, they're not going to be sitting idle for another 10 years. They're going to want results in a year or two, or even now. I don't know. They might not be happy even now. So, I mean, and it kind of keeps repeating throughout the whole industry. I mean, maybe Google has cover, or Meta has cover, or Apple has cover, because they're huge. But, these OpenAI, they can talk nice, but then what can you show? And they can't really show much.
Yeah, it's unclear, the business model.
Exactly. And like OpenAI is pretty much just like, you may as well think of it as being part of Microsoft at this point.
Yeah.
Just because of the way that deal is structured, right? It's basically a way for Microsoft to, get ahead in the AI game without facing the regulatory scrutiny from competition authorities or antitrust regulators in the United States and Europe. Of course, they've delayed that. They are now facing that kind of scrutiny because the regulators are waking up to the fact that this is a way around doing full acquisitions, and just basically controlling the company by stealth, to make sure that it has command of those technologies, that it is benefiting from it, but doesn't have to actually absorb it into Microsoft fully, and then face kind of the back and forth around, will the regulators allow this acquisition to happen, and those sorts of questions, right? And as you say, it's so true that these tools are very expensive to run, and it's not clear that it's profitable at all. And this is where the bigger question around the AI hype moment that we've been experiencing for the past year or so comes in, where sure, these companies said, okay, generative AI is the next big thing, it's going to change the world. And you had the valuations of all these companies involved in generative AI or creating chips start to soar as a result of that. That worked great for investors who, invested early on in the cycle. And I would not be surprised if those investors are now kind of timing it to say, okay, when is the right moment to sell? Because this is clearly going to collapse again. Like, I think Nvidia is in for a huge collapse once this cycle really ends. But then the other piece of it is to think about the data centers, right? These companies, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, Microsoft, and Amazon have announced a lot of plans to build out a bunch of data centers around the world, assuming that these AI tools and that the demands for computation are going to continue to grow. I think there's a question about whether that is actually going to happen, again, because I don't think that these generative AI tools are as transformational as they're trying to claim, and they're also very expensive, and it's not clear that a lot of companies are going to adopt them in the way that the companies hope that they will or imagine that they will. And I do wonder if at some point they're going to have to scale back those data center construction plans, or somewhere where they were going to build 2 or 3 data centers, only build 1 or 2 or something like that, because I don't know they're going to need all the computation that they're putting in the pipeline at the moment. And we've seen that before, right? During the pandemic, Amazon had a very ambitious plan to build out a ton of new warehouses around the United States and many other parts of the world. And once, the restrictions on COVID started to lift and people started to go back to living, somewhat normal lives, Amazon found that, the growth that it was seeing during the pandemic was obviously not keeping up to what was happening during those periods of restrictions when people were much more reliant on things being delivered to their homes instead of going to stores to get them themselves. And so Amazon ended up having to cancel a lot of that warehouse build out that they were planning for. And so I think there's still reason to be concerned about the number of hyperscale data centers that are being built. But I do think it's possible that these companies are currently kind of overbuilding or over planning for something that's ultimately not going to come.
Okay, like you mentioned, the COVID, which boomed the demand for the Amazon. So another thing that I think that really boomed during the pandemic, and well, it was before, but it really boomed during pandemic, is the misinformation. And I think that the AI, with all these deepfake videos and deepfake audio, it's like contributing to this already present problem, and it's getting to really hard to distinguish what is fake and what is real. And what do you think about the responsibility of big tech companies in this case? Like, is it like they are still holding to this position as the facilitator, but can we still see them as just facilitator, or should they like do more to help prevent the?
Oh, I think they should. I think that they have a much greater responsibility than they're admitting that they have, right? They're rolling these products out into the world and then claiming that they have no responsibility for how they're being used effectively, right? They're saying, oh, we didn't intend for it to use this way. We don't want it to be used this way. But they are enabling it to be used this way, right? And we know that it's not just in misinformation, but one of the biggest issues as well, I think, is the use of deepfake tools and AI image generators to create, explicit sexual images of people without their consent. And that is becoming a very serious problem, targeting women in the public eye, but also like young people who are in, school, high school, college, things like that, who are having to deal with that. And I think that that is an issue that is not receiving the attention that it deserves because it's a real violation of, their rights, their privacy, and can really push people from public life when they are faced with this, on and on again. The misinformation question is also an important one. I think that we potentially saw like some positive-ish news out of India where people were expecting deepfakes to really drive misinformation during the Indian election. And what it was found was more that, at least based on what I've been reading, that deepfakes were more used for trolling and for jokes and things like that, and not so much to actively try to mislead people about what politicians were saying. That's not to say that there aren't issues with how technology is being used and how that's interfering with politics and elections and what people believe others are saying. I think everyone has kind of experienced since the generative AI boom and the image generators in particular, this questioning around images and whether they're real, or whether something is fake. And sometimes people like seeing an image that that they're not sure is real or not, and being like, no, that must be fake. It must be AI generated. I'm finding these little things, but they're just like, little kind of pixel artifacts that they're picking out and trying to point to as showing that something is AI generated when actually it's a real image. And at other times, seeing an AI generated image and thinking that it's a real thing. So people can get fooled with those sorts of things. I know that AI generated images have basically taken over Facebook at this point, and they're everywhere on there, because that's like I think quite a decrepit platform that's already aging and falling apart. But Meta is trying to squeeze as much out of it as it can before it properly dies. So I would say I think that there are reasons to be concerned about how generative AI tools are being used for the purpose of misinformation. But I would say I'm probably not as concerned as some other people are about that. I think that sometimes these discussions about misinformation get a bit overblown and make it seem like it's a bit too much of the fault of the technology, rather than the fact that there have always been misinformation in our societies, and I think it's more of like a reflection of the nature of our societies in this moment and kind of larger social factors. And that we're never going to properly rein that in just by looking at the technology, and the technology can often act as a scapegoat for kind of larger social and political problems that we're dealing with. And so I guess that's how I sort of think about it. It's not that misinformation is not an issue at all, but I think that it's a bit more nuanced than sometimes we treat it when we talk about it in relation to social media and AI and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree about the misinformation thing being a bit oversized, I guess, because there's been some reports and studies as well recently showing that it's not like these huge armies of bots or whatnot that are spreading disinformation. It's the super sharers, or they call it that, right? So there's a group of people who are really like political or fanatical or whatnot, and they're really keen to show something online that would make other people vote for their favorite candidate or whatnot. And they do, and they sit at the computers all day, all month, and they do that. And you can't really change people and force them not to do it as well. And it's also not completely related to AI as well, but I've been covering the 2016 U.S. presidential election and the aftermath of that as well, when everyone was blaming Russia and trolls and bots and whatnot. And I looked at the numbers, and I'm not sure if you know this. I think Russia was found to have spent like $50,000 or $80,000 on the social media, like ads and promotions or whatnot, and serious people were saying that this changed the election outcome. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? The campaigns together, they raised what, billions of dollars, and you're talking about $80,000 changing the outcome of the election? Are you kidding me? It's just a little bit Atlantic Council-y to me as well. A bit there's some there are parties to this that are interested in, elevating the conflict or, the tensions and speaking about misinformation as a very, very concerning thing, when it's actually, for some, it's just a game, I guess. I don't know. It's just like, it's a race. I don't know, rat race or whatnot. So that's just my contemplation of that all. And just one more thing. with all these AI generated images on Facebook, on Twitter, X, I'm sorry, yes, I never go to the For You timeline on X anymore because it's just, I don't know, crazy, really, Frim Jesus or whatnot. But there's this theory, and I think you wrote about that as well, that the web might be even dead, or maybe it isn't. But with these, images and audios and videos filling up the web so quickly, social media websites at least, right? So maybe it does. It is on its way to dying, or are we actually coming back with people playing around with these tools, regular people as well, and posting them on the web? Are we coming back to these like 90s period where the internet was, let's admit, a pretty fun place to be at? What's it going to be like, do you think, in the next few years? Sorry for the long rant.
No, that's okay. I'm a bit skeptical that it will go back to the 90s. Like, I know some people have been saying that there's this opportunity to like retake the web and all this kind of stuff. I'm a bit skeptical. I think we've just come too far to go back to that moment. And I think that the 90s was a unique period as well, where the web hadn't been effectively commercialized in the way that it has at this point. And you also had a relatively small user base that was more technologically savvy, that was more likely to know how to code and these sorts of things. And that's just not the structure of the internet that we have today. One of the things that the major platforms did well, that the Googles and the Facebooks and things like that did properly, was to make platforms that regular people who didn't know how to code could easily use, so that they could come online as well and they could be welcomed into the internet and the web and what have you, right? And so I don't think we're going to go back to the period of the 90s. And I think it's very like, sometimes you hear these internet advocates say that, oh, well, everyone should just learn to code and then, everything will be great and everyone will be able to code their own things and run their own servers and whatever. Like, that is never going to happen. And I think that that's actually a very like anti-democratic way of thinking about, the online world, right? Is to make it so that you can only fully engage with what happens on the internet if you can code to a certain level. And that's not like an internet or a society that I would want to see. And so I don't think that we're going to go back to the 90s moment, but I do think that as these platforms erode, that there is an opportunity to think about the way that the web works at the moment, who benefits from it and who doesn't, and whether there are opportunities to carve out spaces that are less commercial, and that are more oriented around the social good, around, collective communication, around these different goals that we might have that are not just around increasing the revenue and profits of particular tech companies that have shaped the way that the web has worked over the past, number of decades. And I think ultimately that is not something that's going to happen through, open source communities getting together to make a new platform or something like that, but it really requires concerted action, from the public sector, from the government, in order to fund those alternative and non-commercial solutions. Because the only way that you're going to effectively compete with these private companies is to have the resources that come with, the engagement that governments and states can have with the internet. That, of course, brings with it a whole range of other concerns, right? I think people rightfully have a certain degree of distrust of governments, especially seeing how they have acted over the past number of decades, right? And the ways that social services have been cut, that they have not been serving the public good in ways that they should have, and have been, adopting policies to benefit these major tech companies and other major companies that exist, to allow them to, extract maximal profit from society while giving back few of the benefits, allowing inequality to increase, allowing housing prices to soar. So I think that there are a lot of legitimate questions that come with a project like that. But ultimately, I think if we're going to take on the power that these major tech corporations have, you're not going to be able to do that without some assistance from the state to regulate them and to fund alternatives. And so if we're going to have some, better future that comes after the erosion of these platforms that are currently tearing themselves apart to make a bit of extra profit, then I think that's the direction we need to think about going.
Yeah. I for one would love a a network society that kind of centers around human agency, and dignity. But one can dream, I guess. I don't
Yeah,
know.
totally.
Yeah,
Dreaming's good, Yeah.
yeah,
We're
but
not going to be able to do something different if we don't dream about what it's going to look like first.
yeah, but if we dreamt and then did something, that would be even better. I don't know. So okay,
Yeah.
so we're in Europe, right? So there's this AI Act thing that we kind of adopted on a European level late last year, I think, or early this year. And do you think it's important, or is it going to change things are done, how things are done in America as well, or is it also just a little bit of a clever marketing scheme because there are quite a few important exceptions in the act as well. So, major tech companies weren't even making that much fuss about it, really. And they would
Yeah.
if they were troubled.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it really remains to be seen what happens with it. I'm not particularly hopeful that it's going to make any kind of huge differences to how these things are working. We know very clearly from reporting in Time Magazine and some other places that the AI Act was watered down after some meetings with Sam Altman to ensure that OpenAI's foundation models were not given the same level of scrutiny as some other kind of AI tools that are being regulated under it. So I think you can very clearly see the influence that industry has had in shaping the way that the AI Act actually works. And I know that there's been concern from more activist organizations that the AI Act doesn't go far enough. So yeah, I think it's good to have some degree of regulation, but I think it's also possible that now that the AI Act is passed, it will be quite difficult to add anything to it or to build on it for quite some time, which will be helpful to the tech companies, right? And we've basically seen something similar in the United States where the White House and Congress have been frequently meeting with the CEOs of the major AI companies to hear from them how they think AI regulation should work. The United States hasn't actually brought forward anything yet, but if those are the people you're talking to about shaping the regulation, then you know the type of regulation that you're going to get ultimately.
And they're one step ahead anyways, right? And they're one step ahead of
Exactly.
the regulations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A couple of more things I would say. Okay, so regulation. We can keep repeating the word regulation, but in the States, I mean, you're closer and you're deeper into all that. It's really hard, right? I mean, is it just the politics? Is it the hypothesis that the Democrats right now aren't really left in any kind of way? They're like moderate, but not even that. Or what's the lobby, or what's working? What's stopping regulation from being? I mean, there's probably been some movement in a positive way lately, like with Linda Khan, and Federal Trade Commission and Communications Commission and the Justice Department in general. I mean, they've been starting some cases. They're going to drag on for years, but still they're there and attention is there. Then, and do you think there's at least in the society, let's say, is there something that you feel that would make you say that the backlash against tech has begun, or is it visible that people have like opened their eyes a little bit more than before? In the early 2000s or even 2009 or 10, Facebook was connecting people, but it doesn't seem so anymore. And maybe people see that. What do you feel around you there?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot more skepticism around the tech companies after the past few years. A lot of that has been focused at Facebook in particular, but I think that you have certainly seen more scrutiny of Uber and Amazon and Google, certainly. I think Apple to a lesser degree. I think Apple still has a bit more of a positive association than some of these other companies, in part because it is more hardware and not so much software. But I do wonder if that's eroding as well as the prices keep getting higher, and it doesn't seem to be innovating very much. But, that's not a big knock against a particular company. It hasn't been doing the very evil things that we've been seeing of some others, or at least not as bad as some of them. But that's not to like defend Apple or anything like that, right? I think that on the regulatory front, obviously we have seen the moves that you've been talking about. You know, we have seen some cases brought against some of these major tech companies. There have been some rules to come out of the Federal Trade Commission that are, you know, targeted at reining in some aspects of these business models that they can do without, you know, kind of passing a law through Congress. But it's very difficult in the United States for a few reasons. As you say, on the one hand, the political system, you know, I'm in Canada, right? And so looking internationally, I often say the United States has two parties, center right and far right, you know. You don't really have a really broad political discussion that's happening there. It's very limited. You don't even have a party talking about public health care seriously, you know? And so it's very limited in, you know, what is kind of politically acceptable within that country. The Democrats, of course, when Biden came to power, were talking more about regulating the tech industry and breaking up tech companies in a way that they hadn't really been talking about for a long time. But even a lot of that has really, it hasn't completely died, but it's been very much watered down. You know, we saw that Microsoft was able to buy Activision Blizzard last year. That was approved by all the regulators, and the only one that was really holding it up for a little while was in the United Kingdom. The Federal Trade Commission, I should say, did kind of try to stop it, but were unsuccessful in doing that. And that was a massive 60-odd billion, almost $70 billion acquisition that was allowed to flow through. And that has really changed the video game market as a result. So it's still having difficulty stopping any of these big mergers from really happening and really changing the actions of the companies. Often when we see the companies change how they act in the United States, it's in response to laws and decisions that have happened in Europe, actually. And so, you know, we don't see anything significant there. And I would say the reason for that is because when Joe Biden came to power and when the Democrats last came to power, China was only, you know, it was slowly growing as a threat that, you know, the United States and that the U.S. tech industry was facing. And as Silicon Valley found itself, really facing the prospect of antitrust investigations and being broken up and being properly regulated for the first time in decades, they needed to find some other place to direct the ire of the U.S. political system. And China was the perfect place to send it, right? To say that on the one hand, you know, the United States is facing this geopolitical threat from China and from the growing power and influence and economic might that China has. But then on the other side, to say it also has these tech companies that are increasingly taking on Silicon Valley and challenging the United States for technological supremacy. And then the tech industry can say, okay, so you have a choice, right? Is your focus really to break up, you know, our companies and the way that we work, or do you want to use our size and, you know, the power and influence and wealth that we have to take on the Chinese tech industry? And I think that's been very successful for Silicon Valley. We've clearly seen the Biden administration take a number of actions, whether it's the CHIPS Act and the potential ban of TikTok that is coming up, and, you know, kind of building on the Huawei restrictions that I believe were under the Trump administration, to start to restrict the Chinese tech industry and what it can do internationally, but then also to develop closer ties with Silicon Valley. So you're not only working with Amazon and Google and Microsoft and these companies increasingly on defense technologies, you know, to help the Pentagon and help the U.S. military. But there has been this big push in Silicon Valley to develop a lot of startups that are focused on building, you know, new AI defense technologies and new weapons technologies and things like that. So for a long time, the tech industry presented itself as kind of oppositional to the government and to the military. Those ties were always still there, just kind of below the scenes. But what we're seeing now is, you know, Silicon Valley working very closely with the Pentagon and with the U.S. government, because it knows that if it's going to keep the power and influence that it has and to try to protect its markets globally from Chinese competition, then having that relationship to the state is essential. And so I think that is also what is making it difficult to actually get some real regulation of the tech companies in the United States, because I just don't think that the U.S. government really sees it in its interest to rein in Silicon Valley in any significant way.
Yeah. Also depressing. One more thing, which is pretty depressing, right? I mean, I think we can wrap it up now. Paulina, last thoughts and whatnot.
So what you would say, should we stay optimistic or like more pessimistic about our future with the tech companies and the tech world?
It's difficult, I think that there are reasons for pessimism and reasons for optimism, right? I think that you need to maintain some degree of optimism, because then, you're just like depressed all the time. So I think that, the tech companies are terrible, are releasing some really terrible products and really don't care about, the social good or the broader social impacts of what they're doing, because they're focused on, their profits and their power at the end of the day. But I think at the same time, we can see them facing serious challenges, even if they're not always regulatory, where a growing number of people are questioning what the tech industry is doing, are not buying into the narratives that they're selling people, are becoming skeptical of the figures who lead the industry as they embrace these really far-right politics increasingly in the United States and Europe. So I think that even though there are a lot of reasons to be skeptical and pessimistic about what's happening in tech, I think that there's a growing movement of people who are opposed to what they're doing. And that gives me at least some degree of hope.
That's good to hear. Let's keep this hope alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add as well that we should always remember that these technologies and tools that we've been talking about today not only reflect the agendas of the people who built those tools, like you mentioned before, Paris, but also are used by the privileged to serve their own interests. So let's keep that in mind, I think, and let's not let little punks like Sam Altman fool us as well. So. No, thank you, Paris, for joining us today. Thank you for your thoughts about technology, and we wish you best in your next endeavors, right?
Thank you a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Paris. Bye.